Broadcasting live from the Business Radio X studios in Atlanta, Georgia, it's time for Atlanta Business Radio, spotlighting the city's best businesses and the people who lead them.
Lee Cantor here with Stone Payton, another episode of Atlanta Business Radio. And Stone, this will be a fun one.
Hey, this is going to be a fantastic episode. Please join me in welcoming to the broadcast. First up on today's show, VP of Operations with Jackson Physician Search, Miss Lori Schutte. Good morning.
Good morning.
Well, Lori, before we get too far into things, can you share a little bit about Jackson Physician Search? How are you serving folks?
Well, Jackson Physician Search is a physician recruitment firm that also specializes in mid-level providers and physician executives. We do searches nationwide from Alaska to Hawaii to Maine to Georgia.
And then do you target like kind of big city, little city, rural, urban?
You know, we will serve anybody that has a need, and that's pretty much every healthcare provider. A lot of larger systems have in-house functions that do what we do, but even they sometimes need help.
Now, what's the kind of state of the industry regarding kind of the rural landscape nowadays? Isn't it tough?
Yeah, rural is really tough, and it's the amount of physicians that want to practice in a rural marketplace is shrinking rather than growing, although pretty soon we're going to have a nationwide crisis in with the amount of physicians that we have.
In terms of there's not enough?
There's not enough. They estimate anywhere between 40,000 and 100,000 will be short by 2030.
How many are we short now, or we have?
Well, I looked at Georgia. There's 22,000 physicians practicing in Georgia right now. About 6,000 of them are nearing retirement age and probably will retire within the next 5 years. And I looked online on some of the nationwide job boards that we utilize and other people utilize, and there were anywhere, if you figure that some of those are duplicates, the smallest board had 500 openings, and the largest one had over 1,000. So that's a lot of physicians to fill for the state, and there's not that many residents that come out of the state of Georgia.
Now, with healthcare in the news constantly, and it seems like it's very chaotic, and it seems like rules change here and there, is that impacting kind of young people wanting to get into this profession?
I think the admissions for med school are increasing. So the number of people that are wanting to go to med school.
So that's not scary. All that chaos is not, young people are still kind of going, yeah, this is something I want to do.
I think so. I think the bottleneck in the system is not in the medical schools. It's providing enough training slots, residency spots for all those people that are graduating.
So how do you fix that?
You get more people, more residency programs opening. And there are some, but probably not enough.
And those are through the universities or the partnerships with the...
It's through any academic center. It doesn't necessarily all have to be through the universities. So some community hospitals offer residency programs. It's usually in conjunction with an academic appointment that the trainer would have.
Now, is there any kind of a technology solution to alleviate some of this?
Well, yes. Although, you know, the patients have to adopt it. And one of those things is telemedicine. Telemedicine's very popular in radiology, but they don't have as much patient contact. Telemedicine is also becoming popular in the rural communities.
Right.
When you don't have access to physicians or you have to drive a really far distance to see them, a lot of times they'll offer a telemedicine option where you can call, you could use your computer, and, you know,
like
log in like Skype.
Skype or something, right?
Yes. And it's funny you asked that because, I took my daughter to an ENT recently, and the ENT had an, option that you could sign up online. I think it was an instrument that looked in people's ears that you could purchase, and then you could have your visits.
Purchase like at the
drugstore? No, I think you had to purchase it through them.
You purchase it through them, and then they can then see in your ear.
Yes,
and they don't have to be anywhere.
Yes,
near.
And it was a flat fee then for each visit.
Like follow-ups and stuff like that would become much easier.
Yes. So I thought that was very interesting.
And you're in the business.
I am.
So that was like kind of surprising for you to kind of experience that.
Yes. I've seen it in primary care, like, I have a sore throat, or we even have that option at Jackson.
Like nurse, where you can call and get some sort of counsel.
Yes, but I've never seen it in a specialty provider.
Right. And that's probably even harder in the rural areas, right? Like specialists, like for just having a general practice person would be great, but now you want a specialist. That's probably next to impossible.
Well, for every specialty, there's they know what's the ratio, the patient population that they have to serve to keep a provider busy. And in lots of, just even for general surgery, you have to do a certain amount of general surgery to keep your skills up. Well, we work in communities that have 2,000 people. That's just not enough people to support any kind of specialist.
Right.
So if you need specialty care in those situations, you're going to have to travel.
That's just a fact.
It's a fact.
And there's nothing anybody can do about it, really.
I don't think that's going to change.
Not today.
Not today. But even primary care, I mean, it would be great if there were more primary care physicians serving the needs of the rural population.
So now, when you're kind of recruiting in these areas, what's some of the kind of pros and cons you kind of do to woo them into to going into one of these less populated areas?
Well, we recently did a survey, and we surveyed hospital administrators in rural communities and physicians that worked in the rural communities. And I think most people think, and certainly administrators, put compensation at the top of the list, that's the driving force behind physicians. But it really isn't what they want. I mean, certainly they want to be paid fairly, but they also want to have autonomy. They want to have a good work-life culture. They want to function as a team. And I think you have autonomy when you're in a much smaller institution. You're kind of like a big fish in a small pond, where if you practiced in a larger institution, a Wellstar, Emory, you're going to be a small fish in a very big
you're
pond.
You're a cog in a machine.
Exactly.
Right.
And you don't have as much say. They also are interested in leadership opportunities. Can they kind of set the direction for the institution? You're much more able to do that in a smaller rural facility than you are in a big system.
Now, we've interviewed a lot of people in different industries here over the years. There was a company that does IT, and then they put all the smart IT people, they put them in rural areas. And they partner with the towns to bring this kind of big IT companies to these, they call them secondaries, to these smaller areas. And what they found is a lot of people, from a quality of life standpoint, they can go in there and, like you said, make a bigger impact, have a lot more, they're the cool kids. Like, there's a lot of benefits of that. And a lot of people maybe were from there. It gives them a reason to move back there that maybe wasn't in the cards. They thought, in order for me to be successful, I have to go to the big city. And here's a chance for me to operate and do what I love to do in the small town that I grew up in. And it can still work out and make sense. Is that part of the sales pitch as
we
well?
see that. And in the survey, we also identified that one of their top 3 driving factors is being proximity to family and friends. Mm-hmm. So, and a lot of, I don't know what the percentage was exactly, but a majority of people who were practicing in rural environments grew up in rural environments, or their spouse grew up in rural environments. So they kind of knew what they were getting. There's
like an emotional, it's hard to even, kind of put a metric on that. It's a emotion.
Yes. And I think it's a very different feel. I don't know if you ever have seen the movie Doc Hollywood.
Right. That's what I was thinking.
Yes. It's very, you're very much a part of the community. Right. Everybody knows you. You have a different relationship with your patients than if you were practicing in the city and see them maybe once or twice a year.
Right.
At best.
So now, how'd you get into this line of work?
Well, I spent 16 years working for the Transplant Association in St. Louis. And then I went to work for a different physician recruiting firm in St. Louis. And then I came here to Atlanta.
So, are you enjoying Atlanta?
I love Atlanta. The only thing I don't love is the traffic.
The traffic. That's what I hear a lot, the traffic.
The weather is fabulous, though.
Yes, I'm sure compared. Now, in your work, what are you spending more time doing? Just meeting different physicians or meeting these the people who need the physicians?
Well, both. You have to kind of think of us as the Match.com of physician recruitment. Right. We work for our clients, so they retain us to fill their positions, and then we work with the physicians to recruiting those physicians to fill those jobs. So it's some of both. And sometimes most of the time when we're hired, the position has been open for a while. They've tried to fill it on their own and were unsuccessful. And sometimes that's due to the process that they have, not that they had a lack of physicians interested. So, and I'll give you a good example. If team-based care is important, I did a talk at a national meeting and I asked the question, how many people in the room think that team-based care is important and you're utilizing it? Almost every hand went up.
No one's saying no.
Right. Well, a few people did, and then I asked, how many of you ask questions during the interview that gets to the heart of how this individual would work in a team? And very few hands were raised. So it's one of those situations where it's important, but they're not necessarily interviewing for those skills. And it's also everyone's recruiting is what we tell our clients. So for you to rise above the noise and your competition, you're going to have to do something special to make this candidate feel special, want to be there. And a lot of places, when we ask them about what they do and how they do it, it's no different than anyone else. It's not special. It's not personalized. It doesn't get to what the heart of the physician's issue is. And the fact is, most physicians, if they switch jobs, if they're practicing and switching jobs, they're switching for a reason. If they're coming out of training, they're looking for their first job, they're looking for other things. So I think it's really honing in on what's important to that physician. And, maybe they don't want to work 100 hours a week, and maybe they want a little bit more relaxed lifestyle. If you know that, then you have to paint that picture for the physicians of that's what your life will be like here.
So you have to recruit each person as an individual rather than kind of go down a checklist.
Yes, very much so.
And then when they're doing it without your help, they tend to just have, okay, this is what we need, these 14 things. So just make sure that they got all this.
And I have to say, healthcare doesn't do the best job of interviewing people, and they don't think that way. They think very methodically. So to them, it is more of a checklist than it'd be like inviting someone to your home. You wouldn't serve them at McDonald's. You would want to, if you were going to impress them, you want to cook a nice meal, and you'd want to know, if they don't eat seafood, you wouldn't serve them seafood. Right. So it's the more personalized it can be, the better outcome you're going to have.
You got to kind of have a lot of empathy in the look it through the eyes of the person you're recruiting.
Well, yes. And it also, that carries forth from the very beginning, the first conversation they have, till after the interview. My favorite story is we had someone that we were recruiting in New Hampshire, and it was a single mother who had a 12-year-old child. Maybe he was 12 or 14. They loved to ski. So the recruiter was very perceptive. And so after the interview was over, she bought a ski cap from one of the local resorts. She stuffed it with the name of their institution. She sent it to her with a note that said, we would love to have you, and I'm going to make your decision really easy. Because she had interviewed at multiple places. Just pick a name out of the hat, and that's where you should go.
Oh, that's great. I'm going to steal that.
You like that?
Yeah. But that takes a high EQ to pull that off.
It is. It does. It does take a high EQ.
Now, is there any different strategies when you're recruiting like younger people? Like I know in the non-medical world, the younger people, they're kind of job hopping. They know that each job is kind of leading to the next, and they're almost like looking for their next opportunity as they've got their current opportunity. Is that similar in the medical field?
The highest turnover rate is physicians that are out of training 2 to 3 years. So they've kind of taken their first job. Mm-hmm. I don't necessarily think that's because of job hopping. I think that's because when they take their first job, they're trained as a medical professional. They're not trained as a business person. They're not trained as an employee. So they don't ask questions that are really get to the heart of their day-to-day life. For example, my best friend in St. Louis is an OBGYN. When she took her first job, she moved to a practice that was across the river, but it was still considered the metro area. The owner of the practice, it was 3 practicing women that practiced together. The founder of the practice, they weren't paying health care for their employees. And so ultimately what happened was they had a revolving door. Now think about when you go to your doctor, you'd like to see the same person taking your blood pressure and greeting you at the door. And because of the way the practice was managed, she ended up leaving, not because she didn't like her patients or she didn't like what she was doing. It all had to do with the day-to-day operations of how the business, the medical practice, was run.
And, they say people quit bosses, not jobs.
Exactly.
And so there's no difference there in the medical world, I'm sure.
That's very true.
So now what are your biggest challenges?
Our biggest challenge, well, sometimes it's a shortage of physicians. So you really have to hunt for
because a lot of them have jobs, right? You're not
60% of the people that we recruit are practicing physicians. So yes, they have jobs. But even there's a reason why they're leaving. And sometimes it's compensation. Sometimes it's, something with their partners. There's strife in the group. Sometimes it's they were promised things and they weren't delivered. So they're dissatisfied for some reason. Because the fact is, if they're a urologist, they're just going to be a urologist in a different place, maybe a prettier place, maybe a place that isn't expecting them to see as many patients. It's all in what is their issue.
Right. So the activity will be similar. It's the environment that'll be different.
Yes. And that's really what you're selling. You're selling the culture of the organization. And one of my favorite questions to clients is, tell me who sells the vision of the organization. Because people will join and will stay with a team that is visionary and has good culture, and it's a fun place to work, rather than going somewhere where everyone is miserable, even if they're getting paid less money at the other place.
Right. So the why is important, the belief of what they're doing and the passion and authenticity. All those are important components of this decision.
And we jokingly say there's a lid for every pot. So we don't think that any search is unfillable.
Right.
But, when you're recruiting someone to a town of 2,000, it's a little different than recruiting someone to come to Atlanta.
Right.
So there's not as many people that are going to want that. And my boss always tells the story of most people that we talk to who say, my geographic preference is this. In the majority of cases, they don't really end up with their geographic preference. And our job is to sell our client's location.
Right. So now, how does a physician get on your radar?
Well, we actively have lists of residency programs. So those that are coming out of training that need jobs, we have the majority of those already in our database. Practicing physicians, we advertise our jobs like in a lot of places. We believe that we should cast a wide net. And when you cast a wide net, you have a better chance of catching the right fish. So they will, and some physicians, we look at 2 kinds of physicians, active physicians and passive physicians. Active physicians are physicians that put their resumes, their CVs online. They've signed up with a a service.
So they want to be found.
They want to be found.
Right.
But 72% of the people out there are not active. They're
Really?
passive.
So
Yep.
only like a quarter-ish of the people out there are actively looking for something else.
That's correct.
So most people, once they have something, they're like, I'm good. I don't think about this anymore. I don't have to do this.
And they've done studies that say it's a very small percentage of people that are actually actively looking. And then there's a group of people that, if the right thing came along.
If it just randomly,
Yes.
somebody sent them an email at the right time, they'll be open to it.
Exactly. And we utilize email significantly to get the word out. Because you never know when you're hitting them, what day you're hitting them on.
Right.
They may have had a bad day.
Yeah, today's the day.
Exactly.
Yeah. And then, so do you recommend the physicians reach out to recruiters to have some sort of a relationship so they know that they exist? So not necessarily like saying, hey, blasting everybody, I'm looking, but just having relationships so look, how's my compensation? How's this? Are there opportunities here or there?
I think that's a great idea. And our recruiters are extremely knowledgeable, and they'll always serve as a resource for you. So if you call them and say, here's my situation,
I'm not looking today.
But you can sign up for job alerts on our website.
Mm-hmm.
So there are things that we could point them where they won't be inundated with 1,000 people calling them and hounding them, but still have their feelers out, so to speak.
So now, what is the kind of the medical provider looking for when they say, okay, you know what, we've tried this, we're knocking our head against the wall, we can't fill is it usually one slot they're trying to fill, or is this something that they want a relationship so they know that whenever we do need a physician that, I'm going to call the Jackson folks?
The majority of our clients are repeat clients. So,
but it starts typically on triaging one job.
Sometimes it starts with one, but not always. Sometimes, depending on how large they are, they may have multiple needs. Of course, if you're successful with the first one, there's usually more to
have. Right.
Exactly. And
it's like when you find a good painter.
Exactly. And the turnover rate with physicians is about 8%. So even, if you have a group that has 100 physicians, that at least 8 of them are going to leave. And that doesn't count other things that might happen, a retirement or, and we know that a huge percentage of our physicians are nearing retirement age. So they often work past 65, what we consider normal retirement age, but they, you have to be prepared for that. And I think sometimes healthcare institutions think they're going to leave. They may leave in 30 days and we can fill that job in 30 days. That's not really the way it works.
What's usually the time frame?
Well, if you recruit a resident, they all finish their training program July 1st.
Right. So there's a clock and now it's go. Right.
Tick, tick. So if you say, I need them November 1st, you're not hiring a resident. So practicing physicians, now you think about, when do most people make moves? If they have families, well, they don't want to pull their kids out of school.
School year. Right.
Yeah. So even if they accept a job, they may not want to start until the summertime. The other defining factor in there is they can't always, they have to give notice at their current employer. And sometimes that's 30 days, sometimes that's 90 days, sometimes that's 6 months.
Wow.
So it's not like
2 weeks.
2 weeks and I'm out of here.
So now, any advice for that kind of hospital administrator to keep their physician happy?
Well, I think you have to listen. I think you have to understand where they're coming from. And I think there's a high degree of frustration with physicians, not even necessarily from the institution, but there's so much bureaucracy that's been put on top of them from the government. Even electronic medical records, which should be a really good thing.
Right. In theory, it's supposed to make their life easier.
Yes. But I would tell you, my friend that's an OBGYN said, it doesn't make me a better doctor.
Mm-hmm.
So, and she spends countless hours at home just trying to keep up with her medical records.
Right.
I don't think we understand how onerous that can be.
So now if somebody wanted to learn more, if they're a medical provider or a physician, it's a website?
Website is jacksonphysiciansearch.com.
Good stuff, Lori. Thank you so much for sharing your story.
You're welcome.
Hey, stay with us. We got one more guest we're going to visit with this morning, all right? All right, next up on Atlanta Business Radio, we have with a CEO with GXG, Mr. Craig Lemasters. Good morning, sir.
Good morning. Thanks for having me.
Well, we are delighted to have you on the show. What did you learn in that last segment?
Well, I was going to say, I hope we can continue it because I was sharing with Lori earlier that my wife's a radiologist. So this is near and dear to my heart.
Networking. Everybody's networking.
That's awesome. I want to call my 4 kids and tell them to go to medical school now, too. It's really fun.
Well, tell us about GXG. How are you serving folks?
Yeah, so GXG, my personal passion and really the mission of our organization is to, as I say, help companies get unstuck. I have a simple philosophy, which is as companies particularly try to grow and grow outside of their just original core business, it's hard. And I think companies get stuck. I like to use simple terms. They're not fancy consulting terms because I think that's the reality of what leaders face. We get stuck on hard stuff. And so we created what I think is a pretty unique learning methodology, really, that helps these folks get unstuck.
So tell us a little bit about your background. How'd you learn how to unstuck people?
Yeah, no, so you're already using the terms. That's awesome.
I'm trying to.
Stuck and unstuck. Yeah, so I'm a corporate guy. I literally grew up in the same company. I spent 27 years with a mid-cap public company called Assurant. The last 12 years had the incredible good fortune of being the CEO and got to lead a big organization, which was just, I tell people all the time, I had the best big company job anybody could have. And I mean that. We got to grow globally, which was one of my passions. When I left a couple of years ago, we were in 27 countries around the world and really just enjoyed every minute of it, but did a bit of an odd thing. Right before I turned 55, decided to leave the public company world, had a great succession plan and a wonderful team and just really wanted to go help other leaders that, as I like to say, are stuck on hard stuff. I think we created sort of a secret sauce to do that and just wanted to share it with other leaders.
So you were immersed in this one company, in this one industry for many years.
Yeah.
And you grew through the organization, which is unusual there just by itself.
It is.
So what do you attribute to that? Was that the leadership at Assurant before you got there that helped kind of allow that to occur?
I think that's right. I think I had great leaders, great mentors, people that really gave me a chance to actually run businesses at a pretty young age. And the other thing the company did a great job of is what I call now sort of morphing the organization. As we hit challenges, the company allowed us to really go try new things, and that just kept giving me new opportunities. I ran 6 or 7 different businesses. Like I said, got to grow a global business, which was always a passion of mine. I think when organizations take that approach, you can keep people a long time. And again, it is a little unusual, and particularly to survive as a CEO for, as I say, it wasn't just 11 years, it was actually 44 quarters by public company count. So
exactly.
I was very fortunate. Yeah.
So now, is there any advice for the leader of a company in order to give, we see so many leaders in here, and it's a double-edged sword. You want to give people autonomy. You want to trust them and give them a say to have their vision.
Sure.
You also have a vision of the organization, so it has to fit that as well. But they can't. You want to allow them to fail, but you can't fail too much and keep growing. So how do you kind of keep that balance? Because you need people to fail and try things that may or may not work, right? You want to take educated guesses, but the marketplace is fickle.
Right. Yeah, no, and it is a balance. I think that's the right way to think about it. One of the things we do in part of our organization now is a coaching practice, and one of the things I'm a big fan on is this sort of concept or philosophy around telescoping as a leader, right? So we know when to telescope in and look at a lot of detail, and we should understand the detail of the organization, but equally or probably more importantly, knowing when to telescope back. and really unleashing the power of these leaders and letting them do it. And that's hard. I mean, you've hit on something very important because it's hard as leaders to do that. Transitioning from doing to leading is not an easy thing. And we want to, I put it in air quotes, help our leaders, which really means micromanage and try to do the work.
That's the trap, right?
It's a trap. It really is a trap. And it's fun when I see leaders, and I was fortunate to have a great team of young leaders, and part of why I was comfortable leaving when I did, because they really got this concept over a number of years that it is better to step back, unleash them, but always be prepared to telescope in. If we see somebody running off the guardrails, we want to jump in.
Right. It's that, again, another balance of, delegate and abdicate, right? You can't just say, okay, you're on your own, and I'll check in at the end of the quarter to see how we did, right?
Yeah, then you're disappointed, right?
Like, what happened?
Yeah, and then we get mad, and it's a lot of frustration.
But some companies will then they fire the person, then they bring in somebody else to fix, or they hire a consultant to fix it.
They hire a consultant. It's a vicious cycle, actually, with a lot of organizations.
But you see, that's systemic. You see this all the time, don't you?
It's everywhere. It's one of the biggest challenges to organizational growth, actually. We focus on a lot of things, but we spend less time on the people part of it. And then when we do focus on the people, it tends to be very tactical development work. Right. What you're talking about is super important, but it's a nuance. It's not just an obvious, easiest thing. And it takes a lot of time. If leaders will spend time teaching that next generation how to do this, then organizations tend to thrive.
Now, you use the word nuance. How does nuance fit in a world where we have so much data and there's so much metrics and numbers, and we can see that you hit that number, you didn't hit that number. Yeah. And then people rely on that to make decisions where you kind of eliminate some of that nuance. Yeah,
I think it's right. It's hard, right? Because we have access today to not only data, but real-time data. And I think, quite candidly, it's become a crutch for a lot of leaders, right? We've stopped investing time in really the people and the next generation of the organization as a result. This idea that we can run by analytics and we can talk about AI and all of the wonderful tools that are either there or emerging. But the reality is business is about human beings.
Right. A human is going to buy something, and a human is going to sell something.
Absolutely. Absolutely. If I go back to Lori's talk, right, radiology is an interesting field to me. And if you think about the AI implications in radiology and teleradiology, there's wonderful tools that can help. But at the end of the day, a human being has got to look at that and draw on their wisdom of decades of work to really understand the diagnosis. And it's the same with leadership.
So now, are there any kind of clues for the leader that, hey, things may not be stuck right now, but we're on the path to being stuck?
Yeah, absolutely. And I have fun with this because it's just it's incredible being able to meet with particularly CEOs and C-suite leaders really all over the world now in the work I do. I was in one industry for a long time, and so it's fun for me to cross over to a bunch of different industries now. And that is the conversation, right? Are we stuck, right? And I define stuck very simply that we're just not moving as fast as we would like. It's not that we're not trying. It's not that we're not making progress. Most organizations are, but we're typically never moving as fast as we would like, right? And so, after a little bit of conversation, most CEOs will open up. They understood I sat in the chair for 44 quarters, so I kind of get it, right, from that standpoint. But the ones that don't, I kind of have fun with this idea of what does stuck look like, right? And we actually came up with a fun list of the symptoms of organizations being stuck. And I have fun with it because I just ask them questions. And it's simple things. And I can ask you guys this. You have your own business, right? Sure. Tell me about your email. Right. And people are kind of inquisitive, like, what do you mean? I said, well, how many carbon copies do you guys use the CC on your email? Right. And everybody thinks you're kind of messing with them. Like, of course we do. We love CCs. Right. And I'm like, well, why is that? And I actually had a CEO that broke the record the other day as we started talking more and more about this, because I would argue that carbon copying people on lots of emails is a symptom of being stuck. Right? Think about the psychology of that. Why would we CC a lot of people on stuff we're working on?
What does a lot mean? What's the personal
the personal record is 357 carbon copies.
350.
Yeah. It's amazing.
That's like you have to use MailChimp to do that. Like you can't send that through your regular email.
Yeah. And the scary thing is this is a big public company, a client. that you would know. I mean, this is not like just a small business that has nothing else to do.
Do you think they're trying to spread the accountability? They don't want to take out, is that what, that's the underlying thing right there.
That's how
right?
they're stuck. And so what we do is I call it this vicious cycle, right? So the first symptom is we have lots of meetings, right? I love to ask people how many meetings we have. Like, oh, we have a lot of meetings. And we're proud of it, right? It's kind of funny, actually. You're like, oh, we're proud of it. We have so many meetings. We do this meeting. I'm like, wow, what's the output of those meetings? Well, we send out these documents, and this is where the CC thing comes in, and we copy everybody. I mean, we are so good at this. And I said, that really wasn't the question.
Because it's transparency, right?
Yeah, under the guise of transparency. Yeah, what do we solve? Like, you got some challenges here, right? You're a public company. I can read your financials. Like, how did you do that? So those are all symptoms of being stuck. Another thing we call buzzword salad. Like, if you look at an organization and measure how many buzzwords they use.
That's their own internal language?
Yeah, it's their own internal language, right? We've literally created a whole language, right? It's like learning a whole new language. It's like, why do we do that? Why can't we use simple words? Like, we're just stuck on stuff, right? When I talk about companies moving from their core, fancy word is adjacencies, right? We come up with all this vocabulary. It's just new stuff, right? It's just new stuff we're trying. But when I see these buzzwords, again, it's this vicious cycle. And my favorite is the whole ideation thing, right? Think tank, ideation. Some would call it design thinking. Nothing wrong with design thinking. There's a whole industry out there. But when that becomes the end and not the means to an end, then we're stuck. And if you look at most organizations that I've talked to in the last 3 years doing this, that's the end state. It's like they want to tell me, hey, we had these great ideation. We had this whole design thinking. And look at all this stuff we came up with. That's awesome. What are you going to do with this to get the organization unstuck? Guess what? We're going to carbon copy everybody. Right. So you start to see this vicious cycle that gets created. It's kind of fun, actually. And then the CEO's sitting there going, well, I guess we're stuck. And I'm like, well, yeah, we could have saved some time just admitting that.
All right, I got to know this. So you're still Craig Lemasters.
Yes.
But you're not Craig Lemasters with Assurant anymore.
That's right.
So how is the whole sales and marketing thing working? And was it tough, at least in the beginning, when you went out and were Craig Lemasters?
Yeah, it's a big transition. I mean, again, I did one thing my whole life. I mean, my background is less interesting than 99% of the population, I suppose, but I loved every minute of it, like I said. But big transition, running a big global company, and to literally having my own small firm. So it took a while, quite frankly. It was, I tell my friends that are still in corporate, big jobs that it was a year of just decompression from the life of a public company leader. It's a blast, but it's a pressure cooker. And don't think that it's not. I get very frustrated when I see people get attacked sometimes in companies, and there's a lot of money in it and all of that stuff. But these are hard jobs. I mean, it is not an easy thing to do, but a big transition for me. I think the difference, Stone, is that what I wanted to do, like I said, right before I turned 55, was to go just pursue, as long as I was blessed with good health, to go pursue some things that I was really passionate about. So here's the way I look at it very simply. This is the part that I do now of a CEO's job, right? A big part of a CEO's job should be getting unstuck and go executing. We've got a lot of people that depend on us, right? That's the part of the CEO's job that's a blast. Unfortunately, in a public company, you only get to do it maybe 20% of the time. There's a lot of governance, shareholder meetings, just stuff. And I'm not saying that's wrong. You have to do it. So the transition for me has been really a blast once I got used to it, because now I get to do 99% of my time is just helping leaders that are stuck. It's the stuff I like. Who doesn't want to do that?
So now, you've built this firm, or was this an existing firm that you joined? Yeah,
bizarre story, actually. So 3 years before I left Assurant, a guy that I knew, entrepreneur, started a bunch of cool companies. I'd have breakfast with him because I like to, use that side of my brain and non-corporate stuff. And he had the foundational idea of what is now GXG. And it was super simple. And I was stuck at that point on digital transformation.
So he had a methodology, or you had this methodology?
He had the idea, which was really, and I call it just a simple wisdom-based learning concept now. So he had the idea that I've got all these really smart operators, not consultants, but people that are actually running companies and pieces of companies, that I could put together a little board and help you get through this digital transformation. And I literally bought it on the spot at breakfast. I'm like, that's a pretty cool idea. but I don't have any other better ideas, so let me try it. Because I had been frustrated. I'd been trying to digitally transform the company for 2 years, and we were getting nowhere. So he formed this little board. It was 5 just complete rock star digital minds from other companies. Again, not consultants. These are people just running parts of digital. And literally, and we use the same process today, it's 3 meetings over about 8 or 9 months, simple 1 day, 1.5 day meetings. And it literally transformed our organization. We built an entirely separate digital company, and even today it's the fastest growing part of Assurant. And so it just blew my mind, these inflection points as leaders sometimes where you bump into something, which this was. I bumped into this guy at breakfast, and it does change the way you think about stuff you've been doing, and just in this case with learning methodology. So long story short, it worked at Assurant, didn't think much about it. Leave Assurant. Didn't really know what I was going to do. I love speaking and helping others on this topic.
So it wasn't like you left and go, I'm going to call the...
No. He actually called me. It was kind of a funny story. The guy called me and we'd kept in touch, and he wanted to scale a business and not really an operator, so he needed help scaling it. And over a series of meetings, actually ended up buying the company at Dunkin' Donuts. So first acquisition ever done at Dunkin' Donuts, perhaps. But
so you bought this...
bought GXG, and
that they still had the way they were they were still offering this service to other leaders.
Yeah, they had done some boards for a few other companies, and again, I just loved the concept and the methodology, and it just felt like the right platform for me to get a chance to go do what I'm passionate about is again, helping companies that are challenged with this stuff. And so I did that 3 years ago, and he stayed on as a partner for about 1.5 years. And then 1.5 years ago, bought him his shares out. And so been doing it with my little team for the last 1.5 years.
So now the team is people who run their own companies that aren't really consultants. They're just leaders. Yeah. And then you just say, hey, it's time. And it's like the Justice League. You all convene and you just show up at some other company to save them.
That's a visual I haven't quite thought of, but conceptually it is correct. But yeah, so I have a small team here in Atlanta that are direct, obviously, employees with GXG. So we've been able to build and attract some really bright young talent.
So then people who ran those, it's not that model anymore.
Yeah, well, it is the same model. But we have our own team that facilitates this whole process. So we have a GXG team, and then our network, as I call them. So we have a pretty big network now, almost 1,000 operators that are in our network. And again, these are people from industry that run various types of businesses, have different skill sets that, as I talk about, and the way I describe the business model, just have wisdom in a certain swim lane, which is the missing ingredient as to how we get unstuck.
So now what does engagement look like? So what's somebody's stuck, or they think they're stuck, they call you up, hey Craig, I think I'm stuck.
Yeah.
You deploy, the bat sign goes up and then you all deploy.
You're sticking with this, aren't you?
This is a theme that's just going to keep on giving here.
So what happens?
Yeah, so we I can't get the bat sign out of my head, but yeah, so we've been fortunate. We have a great group of core clients, and the process has worked. I'm an output driven person. So we are driving through the board offering. We have 2 offerings, but the board work, we're driving for a very specific goal, which is another challenge most companies had. We don't clearly articulate and define what I call the B. Let's just go from point A to point B. This is not fancy again. So we've been very fortunate that the model has worked to help them get to point B across. We've done it in the last 3 years across almost every industry, the medical field, healthcare, financial services, chemical, consumer packaged goods.
So the board is engaging you there.
So the philosophy is working across that. Yeah. So a company would come to us, or we would find them, and they're stuck, let's say, on digital transformation, which was where I found GXG. And we would build a board, and it's typically 3 or 4 external advisors, 3 or 4 internal members. So if you picture a board table, that's who's sitting around it. Mm-hmm. And over this series of 3 meetings, and it takes about 7 or 8 months, then we're going to get them to point B. Very specific output. And again, it can be any topic. I use digital transformation, but we worked on, it's usually growth related. So we have companies that may be trying to expand globally, maybe trying to do new products, and they're stuck on their product development process. Could be implementing technology. We're doing a lot of work around RPA and AI and other technology that companies are really, really stuck on. Blockchain. I mean, these are really hard, very meaty topics. So how would you expect a leader to have the wisdom on all of that
right,
stuff?
It's impossible.
It's impossible. And we just have to admit that and have the humility to admit it.
Right.
And then our board process really works.
Now, you use the term operator.
Yeah.
What does that mean?
Yeah, I just differentiate it from consultant or academic.
So you made your own word because the language we
Yeah, it's just like
that.
I criticize other companies for. We just made it up, but well, it's actually it's an existing word, right? You're operating a company, right? I mean, so but the reason I differentiate it is because we are different. While we're a consulting advisory firm, it's very different from the traditional consulting model, which is, and again, it can be very helpful, but it's entirely academic based, right? So it's some of the smartest people you're ever going to find. But they tend to not have the experience that an operator would have. And quite frankly, it is that definition. And you'll hear me talk a lot about wisdom. Wisdom is the missing link in getting people unstuck. That was my hypothesis as to why it worked for me and why I see it working with our boards today. And the wisdom, I define it very simply as this unique intersection of knowledge and experience. But it takes both. And what happens is, I think, organizationally, as we move away from our core business, where in our core business, we should have a lot of knowledge and experience, right? I mean, you guys doing what you're doing, you know a lot about doing this radio thing, right? I mean, you better have the knowledge and experience. You're good at it. This is your thing. But as you move away from that, if you guys woke up today and decided we're going to get in the healthcare search business, we like what Lori said. This is too good to be true.
Seems so easy.
We're going to
if Lori can do it.
Anybody
go on
can do
LinkedIn, put doctor.
Yeah.
How hard can it be?
Right? And we laugh, but guess what? That's what most companies do. I mean, even big companies, right? And I can speak from experience. We did that a lot at Assurant. Everything kind of looks easy. So my hypothesis was pretty simple, that as we move away from the core into this new stuff that we kind of need to do sometimes to grow, what's missing and why we tend to fail is this thing called wisdom. We just don't simply have the knowledge and experience in the room to solve it. So all we do, if you think about our business model, it's really super simple. We just know where to go find the knowledge and experience through this network of operators. We put them in the room, and then our secret sauce is really facilitating it. Is you have to highly facilitate it to drag that wisdom out and then synthesize it into an answer. But that's it. It's candidly, it's not a very sexy business model. We don't use any technology. I do all the work.
There's no AI?
Nope. It's whiteboards.
I don't need goggles.
No.
Virtual reality.
You don't get any virtual reality. You get a whiteboard and a bunch of flip charts. And, I tell people a lot of times, because we've gotten some really wonderful feedback and because it works. And they asked why, and I said, I think that we have history on our side here. So if you go back to the history of education even, right, how are we supposed to learn? And if you look back at documented history, whether it's biblical or traditional history or secular history, we were supposed to learn the hard stuff from really wise people in a small setting, either one-to-one or in a small, what we would call a little advisory board. And so I think we're just kind of going back to how we were supposed to learn. If I want to go do something pretty hard and I don't have the knowledge and experience, wouldn't it be easier if somebody could put some wise people in the room and then facilitate that to get me the answer? And that's really all we do.
Right. It's not by sending an email with 355 CCs.
Send to help, does it? Because guess what? Those 357 people are just as stuck as you are.
Right.
Now we feel better about it because it's generated
activity. It seems like we did something.
We did something. We generated activity. One of my great pet peeves in business is what we do with the first 2 hours of our day, which, most studies would say is the most productive time for our brain. And you know what? The studies show what most individuals and organizations do the first 2 hours of the day?
Coffee. Gossip.
We've got to do copy, gossip, and then we do
email.
We spend the most productive time of our day doing email, and most of the emails copying each other on stuff we're stuck on. Just doesn't help us. Sad, right?
Yeah.
It's just sad. I freaked out when I was at Assurant. I would always come up with these wacky ideas to try to change the culture and the behavior. And one of them was I was trying to get our IT group to just shut down email till like 11 o'clock every morning.
So that
right?
no email.
So you just couldn't do it because no one would listen to me. Right? I'm like, just don't do it for a couple hours. And, and it made a little. I'm like, can we just shut it down? Right? Yeah. Typical big company that's going to cost me millions of dollars just to shut down email for 2 months. So I couldn't do it. And then we did shut it down on Friday for a while. That was my other pet peeve. It's like, why finish the week doing the single most unproductive thing we can do, which is, carbon copy everybody on on our emails. And I realized they were doing it because if you think about the psychology, how good you feel when you wrap up your week. I got all this done. I mean, you heard people say it. I cleared out my emails.
I cleared out my inbox.
Right. I cleared it out. It's empty. And I sent them to everybody. I win.
High fives all around.
Right. Did you get unstuck? Right. Did we grow materially grow the company this week? Well, no.
Nope. But my inbox empty.
I feel good about it.
Right.
It's kind of silly.
Yeah. Maybe if every quarter you showed how you had an empty inbox, that would help you as CEO. Right.
Yeah, that's right. And it really helps with the shareholder meeting. Right. When I show up at the shareholreader meeting and say, earnings are down and the share price is
my
kind
inbox
of
empty, clean.
We are so good at email. It's amazing, but we do that.
Right. Well, because you didn't define the B, right?
We didn't define the B, and then we don't. And I think one of the great joys I get, quite frankly, doing this work is seeing C-suiters that are pretty hopeless, because we do get hopeless when we're stuck. It's a lonely job. I know that's a trite saying, but it really is, because who can you really go tell that you're stuck?
Right, to be vulnerable. You don't want to
be vulnerable.
Hey, board.
Yeah.
I don't know I feel like I don't know what I'm doing. Yeah, it's like, well, start calling the recruiter.
Call Lori. But I mean, you talk about a career limiting move, right? And I almost did this, right? So I'm expanding. The other thing I did with GXG, we're starting to grow or try to grow in China. I've been in China for like 2 years, and like everybody losing money and just going crazy. It's like, and we've grown our company successfully in Europe, South America, blah, blah, blah. Why is China so hard, right? And it was driving me crazy, right? And you're at that inflection point where the board support you, right? Why wouldn't you want? Everybody wants to be there, right? It's 1 billion people, If you even mess up, you should be able to make money with 1 billion people. But we're not. We're losing money, right? And so you get to that inflection point, like, what do I go tell my boss, my board? Because the honest answer is, I don't know what I'm doing in China.
Right.
Right? Now, I can pretend like I know what I'm doing, but the results speak for themselves. Right? And that was the second time that second part of bumping into GXG, because back to I mentioned coaching earlier, what we do, I think executive coaching is kind of broken. I think it has some benefit, but it's largely behavioral based psychology, which again, I think is important as we move up in an organization to learn about yourself and learn some leadership stuff, right? But when you get to the senior level, it's about operating. Right. And so my challenge was not how I was behaving in China. It was about how I was operating in China. So the second part of our company and really our offerings is a very disruptive sort of executive coaching process using the same engine as our board work, which is this idea of what if we found maybe 6, 8, 10 operators that had the wisdom that an executive needed to get unstuck. And then we just facilitated 1-hour conversations with them. Right? And facilitation is the key, right? We would facilitate these conversations to help transfer that wisdom specifically to what they were stuck on.
To solve that specific problem.
I call them learning gaps.
Right.
And good leaders, what we found, we've been doing this for a couple of years now, and like I'll use myself as an example in China. There were 2 or 3 specific things I was stuck on in China that I just fundamentally didn't have the wisdom to go solve. So guess what? They built learning ecosystem for me. 5 operators that had 125 years of experience in China.
That are successfully.
Yeah, they did it. Just went before me and did it. So again, back to the history of education. He was just a wise person. And I'll never forget the first phone call I had, a guy named Jim Firestone who ran Xerox, ran Asia for Xerox, 25 years experience in China. And I had a 1-hour conversation. All I could say when I got off was, wow, I had no idea I could learn that much in an hour. And you know what? It wasn't about my behavioral stuff, which again is important. But all he did was say, Craig, do this, not that. Don't talk to that family, talk to this family.
Right.
That regulator,
real tactical in the weeds.
Just go operate differently. And how do I know that? Because I just went before you and did it. And you talk about a powerful learning mechanism, super simple. And that's the comment that we've gotten now the last 2 years, that every time one of our clients gets off of one of these learning conversations, they tend to say the same thing I did, which is I had no idea I could learn that much in 1 hour. Mm-hmm. And, again, as you step back and think about it, it makes sense, right? I mean, I've never run a radio station, right? But if I spent after this interview an hour with you guys and had a facilitated conversation about what all this stuff, how do you do what you do? How it's Stone's doing with all those buttons and stuff over there. I don't know, but I would have a pretty good idea after an hour, because it would be facilitated from 2 guys who had the knowledge and the experience, aka wisdom, to teach me. Right? But we don't do that anymore. We don't do it in organizations. And I would argue we don't do it on our own. One of my favorite topics is the whole networking thing, right? I just think it's broken. It just doesn't work.
So now, in lieu of networking in a traditional manner, you're saying to create these opportunities where you're speaking directly with the person who has already been there, done that, with whatever that pain point or wherever that place you're stuck is.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah, we just want to go, first of all, identify what the learning gaps are, and our clients have the humility to share that with us, because we kind of know.
Right.
I mean, we don't know. We've either never been asked or asked in the right way, but we identify the learning gaps. Like, what are the 2, and it's a simple question, like, what are the 2 or 3 things that you would like to really understand to get on the other side of this challenge? That's all. And then we go populate it with people that we know that have already done it.
So then your value proposition is that you have this really diverse network of experts that you can kind of deploy to solve pretty much a lot of problems.
Anything. Yeah. And I argue that I think everybody has been gifted with some swim lane of wisdom. Mm-hmm. And I just believe that. And we see it over and over. And these tend to be people that aren't obvious, right? And we don't have Bill Gates in our network. Okay.
He's not part of your team?
Just not part of the team. We've reached out to him. No, because you don't need Bill Gates to do this, right? I mean, you don't need celebrity knowledge and experience. You need people that have just gone before us and accomplished some things and learned some things that are willing to share it. And so, that's our value proposition, is we know who they are, we know how to find them, and more importantly, we know how to get them involved in this and do it in a way where they love it. I mean, our network folks, they love it. They want to do more calls. They want to be on more boards. They want to tell their friends and family about it, because it's an amazing learning experience for them. And again, I'm maybe a bit of a sap about this, but I still believe that most of us have pretty good hearts, and we love to share our wisdom if we're asked in the right way and it's facilitated in a logical format.
Right.
We enjoy it.
Because people want to kind of have an impact and make a difference and help. I mean, that's what we find every day. And that's what frustrates us in the media business, is that you see the media vilify business people as these greedy, exploitive people, and that's just not who I see in here every day.
It's not our experience at
we
all.
See the most generous people that want to help and are looking for places to help.
Yeah, no, I love that. As soon as I read about what you guys were doing, I was super excited to be here and to meet you guys, because it is very rare today. And especially when I go back to my public company experience, if you've ever done a shareholder meeting or an investor conference, I mean, you want to talk about the attack dogs and the mode. It's just a big gotcha game.
Right.
And it's sad, because most companies, again, not the tail that might be up to something bad, but most companies, the majority of companies, are trying really hard to do very important things. They care about creating jobs, care about taking care of their employees, and building something better. They really do. Really do. And you guys are exposing some of that and giving people a chance to talk about it, not just a soundbite, which is our other challenge, right? Tell me everything you do in 30 seconds.
Before the next commercial break.
Yeah.
Well, thank you so much for sharing your story. What do you need more right now? Do you need more operators? Or are you trying to build that network? That I would imagine is important as
super
well.
Important.
And then you need more board opportunities and more CEOs that feel like they're. Is it only CEOs, or could it be just anybody that's stuck?
It's usually senior leaders, and we go multiple levels down in organizations, because we get stuck at a lot of levels. But it's all of the above. I think now that we've really proven the business model the last few years, we really are getting the word out. I have a book coming coming out in January, which you'll be shocked at what the title is. Unstuck.
Unstuck.
Yeah,
there you go.
There you go. So we have a book coming out, and I'm doing a lot of speaking now, which I enjoy doing, and really just to tell the story. I mean, I think it's hopefully selling itself because we just want to help people. But yeah, that's what we need more. As we grow now, more board members that are interested in the business model, obviously always looking for new clients, and they can all find us at gxg.co.
Good stuff. Well, Craig, thank you so much
Thanks
for sharing your story.
Me. Very fun talking to you.
All right. This is Lee Cantor for Stone Payton. We will see you all next time on Atlanta Business Radio.